All right, this one's going to be on the short-term rental situation in BC. Of course, you can't rent out your unit short-term unless it's your principal residence here. According to StatsCan, there are approximately 100,000 short-term rental properties that could potentially be converted into long-term rental housing across the country. And the argument could be made here that these short-term rental units are taking up stock that should really be for long-term tenants, families, that kind of thing. So the move towards short-term rentals, in my view, has been largely driven by investors. These investors they've been driven out of the long-term rental market because policies such as just overall expropriation of property rights, caps on annual rent increases, extended eviction processes. These have led many investors to turn to these short-term rentals because it's more lucrative and it's less regulated of an alternative. So investors have actually exited the long-term rental market for obvious reasons. And I was saying years ago, be careful not to bite the hand that feeds you. And I got a lot of backlash from tenants. They didn't like what I had to say here. But I was telling you guys, these investors are providing the majority of the rental stock in BC. So be careful not to bite the hand that feeds you, which is what these guys have done. Now, the NDP wants these investors back. They want to bring them back from these short-term rentals and move them back into providing long-term accommodation, when really they were the ones that drove investors away with these damaging policies. So it's as if they want the landlords to provide all the rental units, never raise rents to match inflation. The landlord's going to, I guess, pay the strata fees and taxes and insurance premiums out of pocket. And it doesn't work that way. This is a for-profit business. Investors are not looking to subsidize tenants. They want a decent cap rate, a decent rate of return. So here's the problem. The current government has fostered an extremely hostile business climate. This has made it very risky for investors to re-enter the market. And many landlords, I know a lot of them, many of them are realtors, they've already exited. They cashed out ahead of those changes to the capital gains inclusion rate. Remember a little while ago, they went from taxing you on 50% of the gain to 67%, way too high. So yeah, some might have pivoted into short-term rentals. Most exited though. Capital's liquid, it can go wherever it wants. Nobody's putting a gun to your head saying that you have to invest in rental property in BC. And I think a lot of this money moved into things like low-cost index funds. I've seen a lot of these Vanguard funds with very low MERs, 10, 15% annualized rates of return over the last couple of decades, completely passive, no tenants to deal with. So in my opinion, that capital has gone now. It's not coming back. A recent study, okay, even if this did, listen, this most recent study, even if you freed up all the short-term rentals, all of them, it would only increase available housing stock, according to this study, by 0.69%. So you're missing the main point here. The approach to housing policy I would propose, if I was the government, if I was premier, first of all, brass tacks, boot out the NDP, okay? Oust BC Housing Minister Ravi Kahlon. The NDP are screwing up the market. That's what they always do. Government intervention in markets is never a good idea. It's always loaded with unintended consequences. What I would do, as premier, I would sit down and I would engage with industry experts. So I'd have a roundtable discussion. Bob Rennie would be there. I'd have Anne McMullen, who I've interviewed before from the Urban Development Institute. I'd have, a guy like John Stovell over at Reliance Properties. I'd have all these developers, we'd sit down and I'd say, look guys, let's stop screwing around here. How do we engage the free market enterprise system to build the tens and tens of thousands of new homes that we need? And here's the problem though. The NDP, this government, will not consult with these guys because they view them as the enemy. The development industry, the speculators, the investors. Unfortunately for them, the development industry builds the homes. Speculators finance new construction via the pre-sale market. Remember, you need to be 60 to 70% pre-sold before you can even get construction financing and get shovels in the ground. And investors are providing most of the homes in the rental market. Who do you think you think the government's going to be able to provide those homes? Look at the track record on this. But does the NDP consult the real estate industry before implementing any new regulations? Never, because the real estate industry is the enemy. You know, these people that I talk to, the NDPers, they lean socialist, they seem to think that developers and the real estate industry and realtors like Jay are the enemy here, when it's the liberal NDP socialists. They're the enemy. More taxes, they're just taking their pound of flesh here. You know, more regulation and taxes makes real estate more expensive, not less. Look at all the taxes that have been implemented under the rule of the NDP. It hasn't done anything for affordability. You know, government is not the solution to anyone's problems. As I've always said, government is the problem. The rescission period, if you recall, the NDP, this was when bidding wars were commonplace and everything was going at 15, 20, 30 offers. I said from the beginning that it was dumb. Of course, right now, most offers are written with subject clauses anyway, subject to finance, insurance, inspection. But there was no consultation with the real estate board. And I remember the board put out a statement around this time, basically saying in a little nice, softer language that this is a dumb idea, straight up. And of course, the NDP fired back and said, well, the real estate industry, they want to keep, they're self-interested, they're greedy, they want to keep pumping up the prices. That's not the reason for the statement from the real estate board. You know, the reason was it was an ill-conceived and downright dumb idea, which would have it hasn't had any impact. So what about incentivizing development? What about offering incentives, tax breaks, removing development cost levies, increasing density allowances? Any developer is going to tell you that high density projects, look, if you build a 40-story building, you can market units at a far more affordable price point than if you're building a 4-story building. That's pretty common sense. Any developer will tell you that. And yet I see these 4-story walk-up buildings on the West End in some of the most expensive, desirable land in North America. It's ridiculous. Some of it's prime waterfront. I see several vacant lots where I live here in Falls Creek, in and around the Olympic Village. Prime waterfront location, sitting vacant. They've got a turnip garden on one of them. It's got to be the most expensive turnips in North America, and a parking lot. You know, and yet government continues to play whack-a-mole. First, they hammered down the investors, and of course, up pops the short-term rentals. Now they're trying to hammer down the short-term rental industry. What's next? Probably more taxes, more rental protections for tenants, which I know you guys think they're helping you with this, but they're not, because they're driving these landlords out of the business, and that's what's causing these ultra-low, close to zero vacancy rates. According to the NDP, thousands of illegal Airbnbs are still in operation. Of course they are. Of course they are, because the excessive regulation, now they've created a black market for short-term rentals, and it's just driven the market underground. The next step is to create, I guess, sometimes some kind of a short-term rental crack squad to investigate the. It's more money wasted. You know, it's infuriating. What a waste of just taxpayers' time and money and the bureaucracy involved. What a waste of money. You know, this is why I got out of the rental business, by the way. I don't like the government telling me what I can and can't do with my property. But shifting gears here, if you are an investor, you own a rental unit, you're looking maybe to sell it, you're tired of the government telling what you can and can't do, you know, you might be in a situation where you're getting way below market rents. I see that a lot. Of course, you're unable to bump those rents up to market. The biggest mistake that I see in this instance, and I've done a few videos on this, is now you're going to try and sell the property tenanted. Bad idea, because first of all, you're going to be working around the tenant's schedule to schedule viewings. That is going to limit the property's exposure, which is crucial, especially in this market. You really want to maximize the exposure. You're really cutting yourself off at the knees with this. But secondly, it's never going to show as well as a vacant unit. I don't care what anybody says. You know, not all tenants are messy, but it's never going to show that well. Stage it, professional photography, video tours, pump it out on social media. This is going to be more and more important as time goes on to give you this competitive edge. Get that mutual agreement to sign to end tenancy. Even if you have to buy out the tenant here, here's $3,500 if you are out in the stipulated time frame. It's mutually beneficial for the tenant anyway. They don't want to be living in the unit while you're showing it, and they can move on with their life. Sellers are hesitant to do that though, because of course every month that property sits on the market empty, you're going out of pocket $2,800, $3,000, $3,500. I mean, these prices are getting up there, rents are getting up there. But by listing tentative, you're leaving tens and tens of thousands potentially on the table in terms of that eventual sale price. So if you trust your realtor, and you should be listing in alignment with current market conditions. You should be provided a professional CMA, a comparative market analysis. Your realtor should know what it's going to sell for within, pretty close. And, right now, if you price it correctly, we're going to get it sold within a month or two anyway. So you're not going to be out of pocket that much. But most listings, and I know sellers don't want to hear this right now, most listings are overpriced. In some cases, significantly overpriced. Product priced correctly, high quality product, is still moving, okay? But of course, if you overprice it, then it's going to sit on the market 180 days, multiple price reductions. Now you've got a stale listing. So you're better to list it correctly, generate some interest, and sell in the first few weeks while that listing has momentum. If you don't trust your realtor's assessment of the property, it's probably time to find another realtor. And I give you guys the brass tacks. A lot of realtors will tell you what you want to hear. I'll give you a pretty good estimation of what it's worth. But to cap it all off here, this is what government interference in the free market causes. Landlords are continuing to exit the business. I think this is going to get worse with the new tax inclusion rate, with all these taxes and regulations. And that's why we continue to have this near zero vacancy rate. It's almost impossible for somebody to find a place to rent in BC. That's the result of this. I'm Jay Coupar. Feel free to comment below or subscribe. If you want a free market evaluation, hit that green icon, and I'll see you in the next video.